Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Siddharth Siroi with us on Audio Gyan, co-founder of the furniture company called Baro in Mumbai. From film production design, Bombay-based Siddharth followed his heart into making furniture that told a story. Siddharth's aesthetics are highly influenced by simplicity and classic lines of mid-century modernism. And today we are here to discuss with him the origin of Baro and its philosophy and some more Gyan on design. So thank you, Siddharth, for giving us your time, and it's a real pleasure to have you on Audio Gyan.
Well, thank you, Kedar, for having me.
Yeah. I've recently, probably a year back, I stumbled upon Baro and I've been following the kind of work you're doing, following you on Instagram as well. And I have few questions regarding the product philosophy, what you follow, and more about Baro and generally your thoughts about design. So I've come up with few questions and let's see how we take this forward.
Sure. Right.
Cool. So on your website, you said old school patience I'll quote, old school patience is the key to good design. So can you start by telling us what do you mean by that and what's your general philosophy behind design?
Look, it's in two parts. So if you look at old school patience, what I'm trying to arrive at is the freedom one had earlier in terms of the time taken to do something. So you took a fair number of time because not everyone was breathing down your neck saying that, I want it yesterday. So you could do what you did with patience, and this is something I tell all the people who work with me, especially the karigars, that the difference between something made well and a disaster is 15 minutes. So if you take that 15 minutes extra, you get that joint right, and that piece of furniture will last a lifetime, as opposed to rushing it by 15 minutes and you reduce the life by 15 years. So that's the patience that I speak of. And whether you apply it to the actual construction of things, where the process of making something benefits from the amount of time spent on it. Like our polish process takes about a week. And I could do it in 3 days, but it wouldn't be the same. Mm-hmm. But you need for the layers to dry. And we use an oil-based finish, an oil and wax-based finish. So, and we don't cure it. So you let it breathe and sort of dry naturally, and it takes longer in the monsoon. And of course, we do have clients saying that, oh, come on, where's the product? Why isn't it ready? But I always implore them for more time because we can deliver a better product. And that's the patience that I speak of. And similarly, when it comes to design of it, we are often in a rush to find the quickest and easiest solution. Now, the easiest solution is something that I'm in concurrence with. Yes, you should always look for the easiest solution because it's also the most efficient solution. But the quickest is not something that I necessarily go with, because the quickest solution may not be the easiest. It may be something that is part of your conditioning, and it's not something that you have arrived at by peeling layers. It's probably the top few layers that and if you haven't raised enough questions, you're not likely to solve a problem to its most efficient conclusion. So my way of looking at a problem is and by problem a design begins with a problem. You have a problem to solve, you go ahead and you solve that problem. So when you look at a problem, we look at it en masse and saying, oh my God, that's a big problem. How do I solve it? But the way I go about it is to try and break that problem down into a billion sub-problems. And billion, of course, being metaphoric. Mm-hmm. But if you look at a problem in its minute sub-problems, it's always easier to solve a simple problem.
Correct.
So if you break it up into a smaller, easier problem, you don't get overwhelmed by the problem itself. So the trick is not to find the answer. The trick is to find the question.
Wow.
And if you can find the question, you will find the answer automatically. The answer is not hard to find. Okay. But you have to ask the right questions. And those questions is what takes time. So when you're going through the process of breaking down a problem, a design problem, you have to invariably ask as many questions as you possibly can. And that's what takes time. And that's the patience you need to be able to ask that many questions. And very often when you ask a question and the solution may conflict with your previous question.
Okay, and just going deeper into the same question, because this, so you spoke about the Karigar itself to give him enough time, and also at a pre-production level or just at a strategic level to ask a lot of questions. But there's also a state in between where you want to just keep iterating on the design itself, and that journey is endless, right? Because every day you think about it and you can see a more optimal solution.
Yeah, that's because you haven't asked enough questions.
Okay.
So if you had asked those questions to begin with, see,
you navigate or guide those questions to be like a guiding principle while you are designing it, while you are executing it.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said earlier, you have to keep peeling the layers, right? And sometimes we don't see the layers that we've peeled. We just feel that, we've uncovered it all. And while the process of making, unfolds, you're like, oh, I didn't see that. And there are times when you don't see it, right? But the endeavor is to look for it. And the more efficient you get at looking at problems beforehand, the more efficient your process. And Baro being a small firm, we don't have the luxury of creating prototypes over 6 months.
Correct.
9 out of 10 times our prototypes end up in the shop.
Wow.
So, we make something the first time and it's at the shop. I mean, to begin with, we didn't even have the luxury of 9 out of 10. It was 10 out of 10. And now that we've been around a few years, we do take, let this be an experiment and go from there. But the endeavor is still to make that the final product.
Interesting. And so does that happen that you have asked enough questions, but still while designing you come up with more questions? So how do you stop that journey also?
I think that's the other side of the coin is the simple side. So you try and keep it simple.
Okay.
So by arriving at the solution, the final solution should be a simple solution. So too many questions also means too many answers. And if there's too many answers, the chances are that they will conflict. There will be some kind of conflict because it's like strength versus, say, delicateness. Right? Do you want it to be delicate or do you want to be strong? Now you want it to be both. So you come at a meeting point where you shed a lot of excess flab and say, okay, this much is enough. In terms of questions, in terms of strength, in terms of being delicate. And that's the journey that you're always navigating. What do you drop and what do you keep?
Yeah, I mean, there are no solutions, like only trade-offs. So you deal with them.
Absolutely. Always. Yeah.
So I can see this, obviously, and I expected this conversation to go slightly philosophical as well. The next thing which I want to ask you is you are attracted towards like wabi-sabi form. So can you tell our listeners and me also like what is that and which part of that philosophy just attracts you and how does that translate into your work?
I'm not an authority on wabi-sabi, so I won't get into what wabi-sabi is. I can give you a general idea of what it is. I mean, it's a philosophy that is supposed to have originated around the tea ceremonies in Japan back in the 17th and the 16th centuries.
Okay.
I don't think it was... I think it has certainly been refined over a period of time into its modern take, and which is that beauty captured by anything that we see and that we, the world around us is not a function of its perfection, but rather a function of its imperfection caused by the passage of time. So you take, natural forms, you take the passage of time which creates its own sort of motion and form and patina and, whatever time will bring into something is something that you cannot replicate.
Correct.
And that's something that you cannot control. So it's part of this whole Zen philosophy of allowing the universe to unfold as it unfolds. There's only so much control you can, have. And the the wise man sort of, you can't take a river and start channeling a new direction. It'll just be a pain in the ass. What you need to figure out is how do we take that course and, irrigate your field. Use gravity, use the natural flow of things. Why fight against them? So it's in a bit of a dichotomy with this whole new age perfect sense of what things ought to be, which are precise and symmetrical and absolutely. I mean, I use a lot of symmetry in my work still, but I try and bring it with a certain sense of wabi-sabi, where primarily in the form of the wood that we use. We use a lot of old reclaimed wood. I mean, not a lot of, we only use reclaimed wood. And that has come from, we had a lot come in from, say, the Mantralaya. It was an old library that was broken down and the shelves from there came in and we had a few products made from there. So it came with its nails and screws and, wedges and holes and all of that. And we celebrate that rather than saying, no, that's not how it should be. I mean, I'm not deciding what it should be. I'm saying this is how it is.
Beautiful.
So the conflict is reduced. The conflict now comes with trying to convince somebody else. It's saying that this is also beautiful. Why do we want to make it all perfect? Because I think perfection wears out very quickly. So imperfection is something that you constantly look into far, far deeper because you'll always find more layers. Perfection would be a reduced, simplified, base version of imperfection is what I call it.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe this, in the follow-up question, this will slightly, I'll put my contradicting thought around it. But yeah, how does that translate into the Barro's furniture you mentioned? So is that a constant thread which runs across while designing, or it just comes naturally?
Wabi-sabi?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I always keep it in mind. Now, it's not to everyone's taste, unfortunately. And people want polish to be perfect and it to be uniform. And I'm like, but guys, that's the natural wood grain. I mean, I'd rather not fight it. And that's what we do. We keep it naked. We keep it as transparent as possible so that we're celebrating what we see. But of course, you do have clients. So it's a kind of a tightrope walk that you have to manage, where we're like, okay, fine, that's what you want. We'll give that to you. But given a free world, we do try and, at the end of the day, we still need the business to allow us to do what we do.
Correct.
Right. So like all endeavors of art, you kind of, try and walk a line which transcends both worlds.
Correct. So yeah, coming to the imperfection part, and also the next segue into the next question is very personal to me, because I keep swinging between this ethnic, I may not call it wabi-sabi, but it's like unknowingly following something like that, like having a natural flow to things and keeping it as old vintage look and those kind of things. And sometimes I swing to the other extreme of going all minimalistic, or maybe something like Peter Ram's ka furniture, and like very, very like cutting right angles and simple. So first question is that if you say perfection is like time-bound thing. So then how does a person like Dieter Rams working for 40 years on that same piece of furniture, iterating, evolving, do you think that will have, isn't it like timeless?
That's not what I meant when I said time-bound and timeless. So
okay.
When it's I'll half agree with you. Let's say I'll come on the meeting ground, and so there are things that are extremely simple and are absolutely perfect the way they are in their simplicity. But that's not necessarily. I mean, for example, a circle is a perfect form.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And the difference comes from the fact that once you've seen the circle and you've seen it in its perfection, it takes a very evolved mind to look at a circle every time and say, oh my God, that's perfect. most of us in our day-to-day lives will look at a circle and just get bored of it.
Yeah. Take it for granted.
Take it for granted.
Yeah.
Right? So it takes a higher level of evolution of an individual to actually appreciate the simplicity of its perfect form. And that's, and I'm including myself in the other category where I'm saying that, I do look at a circle beyond a point and say, oh my God, it needs some play. Right? So maybe 40 years down the line, I will subscribe to the philosophy where all I need to do is make a circle. But yet, I'm yet to get there. So I am still in the process of what I call playfulness and simplicity. So that's a very strong philosophy that we follow at Baro as well, as far as design is concerned. We keep it simple, but we keep it playful. So I'm a little cheeky in my, I like to call myself slightly cheeky in my interaction with the world. I push boundaries. I tease. I bring about a sense of imbalance in order to create a balance, because balance is just not there, right? And you push a boundary to create an imbalance. And that imbalance is the play. So you just offset it a little. You make something tapered where you can make it straight. You keep it intriguing. You keep the interest alive. So when you keep peeling the layers, you arrive at a circle eventually, but you have to get there.
Correct.
So, like I said to you earlier, I'm still peeling the layers. So therefore, I have to play right now.
Wow. This reminds me of one quote which has inspired me for a very long time. It's like when you don't know Zen, rivers are rivers, mountains are mountains. When you're learning Zen, rivers are not rivers, mountains are not mountains. Yeah. And when you have learned Zen, rivers are rivers, mountains are mountains. So I think you nicely fit into that center bucket where there's a rebel, there's a conflict, there's trying to pushing the boundaries. Yeah, beautiful.
So I do know that rivers are rivers and mountains are mountains eventually. And I think that's the journey that I'm on. The tricky part becomes convincing everyone else around you. If I was making furniture for myself, I'd say this is a mountain and this is a river. But I have to find my own conviction behind that.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, I could see that now that I recollect, there's a nice bookshelf of glass which I saw in Baro, and instead of the straight lines for like a typical bookshelf which you see in IKEA or any place else, you've just slightly tilted some angles and given like a pentagon or a hexagon kind of a look, and which completely differentiates it from a regular one,
right?
And that makes it intriguing also.
Yeah, and that's the play that I'm talking about. It's just, that's the playfulness. It keeps us young. A child's not looking for perfection. The child's looking to play. And sometimes it's nice to just be young and playful.
Yeah. Cool. And the second part of the question which I want to ask you is that since these two things obviously are very exciting for a designer, keeping it minimalistic, or at least for me, keeping it simple, minimalistic, and yet have some connection with the roots, some connection with the old age architecture, old age furniture which we have seen. So is it possible to marry these both worlds, or you have to polarize one or the other? Well, this we briefly spoke in the earlier call as well. Like, how do you marry? Because I've been doing my interiors in my house, and I keep I want the tiles to be minimalistic, but as the flooring, and maybe the walls could be completely white, but the furniture can be really Baro style or ethnic or mid-century modernism kind of a thing. So how do you balance, or how do you, is it possible even to marry these worlds?
Well, I think for me, and this is entirely a personal take, mid-century modernism was the peak of design as such, because it refined a language from the excess to minimal, and yet there was a lot of play. And if you look at, say, the 1950s, we're still talking 70 years ago, and 70 years is a long time for a design to persist, and it is a test for sure as well. So when we look at, say, design movements, even from, say, the earlier 20th century or late 19th century, you had all your classic movements, then go closer towards say, Art Deco in the beginning of the 20th century. And that was a reduction of all the flourishes from, what's the movement before that?
Bauhaus.
No, so Bauhaus is the precursor to Art Deco, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Art Deco, Bauhaus kind of bore the same sort of roots. The Mucha, Alphonse Mucha, the artist. I'm blanking out on the name. Anyway, it'll probably come back to me later. So you had a lot of excess flourishes ranging from, the last several hundred years, coming to a reduced form, saying that it was unnecessary. So a lot of socio-economic, and I think the fact that people started to make things in a reduced span of time led to a reduction in the excess of flourishes, which led to Art Deco, and earlier Art Deco was a lot more elaborate and it has more flourish. And as it comes to the later years, it reduces in the amount of detail it carries. By detail, I just mean the excess flourishes. And then from there, the natural course took it down to Bauhaus, which reduced them even further, reduced to saying that, okay, we need absolute minimal stuff, which arrived at mid-century. And then from there, later became minimalist. The Japanese minimalist was this whole movement which started, became very popular, and everyone had straight lines and boxes. And so I try and marry a sense of... So I don't look at it purely as an aesthetic. What I look at it is the ease of making.
Okay.
So the aesthetic follows from there. But the aesthetic also comes from a lot of other aspects. Like I have this other design philosophy, what I call the lightness of being, play on that Kundera novel. So the lightness of being essentially dictates how visually you can reduce the volume of a given piece to make it lighter. Given the fact that the world is a really heavy place and it's getting heavier by the more people we add to it, and the excess consumption and everything else. So how do we make our spaces lighter? So if you can have, let's say, a TV unit takes up a certain amount of volume. A dining table takes up a certain amount of volume. What do we do to make it visually lighter? So,
and strong. Yeah.
And keep it strong as well. Right? Yeah. And I don't necessarily mean delicate. I just mean visually lighter. So we have tapered edges for that. We chamfer off the edges for that. So we reduce any amount of bulk that is not necessary. So we keep the points of contact strong, and those are you can't mess with that. But where it's excess, where it's flab, we just reduce that. So what it allows you to do is it allows you to breathe. You have a thinner tapered leg. Your vision goes under it, kind of lifting it higher. I don't know, it just sounds a bit metaphoric, but there is a lightness that comes in the given piece which makes you feel lighter. Because there's a reduced bulk in your space. And yet it serves the function.
Correct.
So that's my journey to arrive at a form. And I find a lot of mid-century follows this similar philosophy. I don't know if they call it the lightness of being or something that I concocted, but I think it's there. And a lot of Japanese minimalist furniture has that. But I say that, why have a connecting piece of wood straight? Because it can be reduced in the middle or anywhere else, depending on the construction technique that we use. But why not make it lighter? And that is what allows me to arrive at a form. So I don't know if it's modernism or ancient or old or new, but yet it arrives at a form because of a philosophy that I follow, because of what it needs to be.
Correct. Interesting.
So
sorry, but does that mean there's a lot of wastage as well? Or if you find a great piece of wood, and you feel that a particular piece of furniture may not need such volume of wood. So is it is it just removing those unnecessary parts or reusing them someplace else as well?
Well, we try and reuse as much as we can, but there are times when you can't, when it just goes to waste. But the point still the point is that, and it's the whole argument that I have with your plate being full and people, dying of starvation in Africa. I mean, just because your plate is, you're throwing the food in the bin as opposed to eating it, I mean, they're still starving. Right? So just don't serve too much in the plate to begin with. I can understand that. But if it's there in your plate, whether you throw it in the bin or whether you eat it, it's still the same effect. Right? So why eat it and, become obese? Just don't eat it because, I understand don't serve yourself in the first place. Let your eyes not be bigger than your stomach. I get that philosophy. But once it's on your plate, whether you eat it, whether you throw it in the bin, effectively amounts to the same thing. So if you are using a piece of wood that is connected, and in the middle, and if you keep it plain and simple, it'll be there.
Yeah.
But if you want to make it lighter, remove it. Remove a part of it. So that is not that's not a wastage as far as I'm concerned. It's adding to the fact that it's lighter eventually. And somewhere that'll get used. Someone will use it for firewood, if at all.
Yeah.
So that's in India, we have such a strong sense of recycling. We want to make use of every given little thing. I don't know from a bigger perspective of saving the planet, but from a necessity like we can do with all the, the surplus that we have.
Yeah, and it's kind of not a controversial, but a point of debate always, because there are different school of thoughts, and there are certain things which can be really controlled and which cannot be. And I think it's a subjective thing, I think, more if you get into it.
Yeah, I can take a straight leg and, if it's 2 inches on top, the wood will invariably be an inch below if I'm tapering it, or 3/4. So what I try and do is I flip the two in a piece of wood so that you get both sides to it, right? So you take out 2 pieces in a wood piece that's 3 inches long. 3 inches wide. So because you flip it, right? But there are times when you don't do that and you've got 2 inches on top and 2 inches below, but you still need the leg to be, say, 3/4 on the bottom end of it. So you have no reason but to shave it, because that 2-inch leg from, if it's running from the top to the bottom, just doesn't look light.
Yeah. And doesn't appeal to your aesthetic sense also.
It doesn't.
So coming to the wood, which is my second last question actually, I've read through your website also, you use a lot of reclaimed teak wood. So I've done a bunch of interviews. In fact, just 2 weeks back I met Aziz Kachwala, who plays around with different materials, flexi ply and stuff like that. Prior to that, I had discussed some parts of bamboo with other professors from IDC and NID. So on the same lines, I just want a layman's perspective as to, as a layman, as in not an academician who has studied wood in general, but from you being as a designer, what is reclaimed teak for a layman, and what significance does it have in the Indian context also?
Well, reclaimed is literally reclaimed wood in this case is so wood that was used once. So, let's start with the tree. The tree was there in a beautiful old, at least 50-year-old teak tree, if not 100-year-old teak tree, was designated to be cut. It was cut, chopped up into its components, and there were rafters made out of it, or doors made out of it, or bookshelves, like I mentioned earlier, made out of it. Once that building is torn down, there is a whole sub-economy that runs into place and says, okay, we can use a lot of this material. From the rubble to the metal to the wood, there's a whole system that operates, which then takes these into literally like scrap. Right? So they pull that wood out, they pull the metal out, they pull whatever else that's useful, and it goes into its designated markets. So you have a market which sells you old, ripped down teak from old houses. So a lot of roofing was, rafters with, shale on top or whatever, some kind of a brick or a stone on top. So those rafters are very useful. Doors were made out of large wide planks of teak. So those then come into use. The advantage with that is that it doesn't have to be seasoned, because seasoning of the wood essentially involves reducing the amount of natural moisture content that of a tree into wood. So when you make furniture, you don't want the natural moisture that exists in a tree to continue in the wood, because it creates distortion. And as the water sort of leaves the wood, it bends it, it warps it. So it creates distortion and therefore affects your furniture. So what happens now with new wood is that you season it. But seasoning essentially means driving the moisture out. So you do it artificially today.
Correct.
Right? You put it into a seasoning plant where they smoke it, they produce heat, and it draws the moisture out. This is a process which nature takes care of. So they would have seasoned it to begin with and then left as it is for the next 100 years. And there's nothing, no factory that can replicate it.
Correct.
It's like, it's the best possible seasoning you can arrive at. The other big factor is that wood that was used in the past was from extremely old trees, large trees, because there was an abundance at that time. As a consequence of scarcity of wood, as a consequence of, the scarcity because of the excess demand now, what has happened is now the average age of felling a teak tree is 30 years.
Okay.
Reduced from a minimum age of 50. So you don't let the tree mature enough. And you say, okay, it's ready in 30. But earlier it wasn't a question of when it's ready. It's like, a woman is ready to bear a child at 16, but that's not the age for you to have a child. So that's the idea of using an older tree back in the day. Today we don't have that luxury of saying, okay, let it mature for the next 20 years. Because then people are losing time and they're losing money. So they'll cut it a lot quicker. So the tree hasn't matured enough. The wood hasn't become rich enough. You'll find a lot of raw, whitish kind of texture to a lot of teak that you find today. Yeah, and the grain hasn't gotten closer. So the quality of wood is essentially inferior. Yeah.
So you prefer to use the one which is seasoned naturally?
Seasoned naturally, better quality of wood, and my conscience is clear. Because I love teak as much as I love wood as much as I love trees. So it was a big, how do you make furniture? And I love wood so much. I was like, shit, I don't want to make it out of anything else. So I'm happy at the end of the day because I'm saying I'm not cutting a tree, and I'm still using all this glorious wood.
Correct. Yeah. So Siddharth, I would like to conclude with one last question, and this is slightly a personal take rather than Baro's journey. That in your previous stint, you were working as a film guy or a production guy, right? And now that you are into designing furniture and you've created Baro the way we see it right now. So I want to just ask you that, actually I want to connect with one quote which I had stumbled upon. Like Miles Davis once said, sometimes it takes years to sound like yourself, right? So how did you land up in the taste or the type of furniture you design has got some signature of Siddharth, or it has got its own aesthetics, right? So how did you arrive at this particular style? Because it takes really long for designers to, you know what I mean, right? Even in painting, it takes like years for a painter to start looking like he has done it, and it's not a replica, it's not a copy, it's not. So similarly, how did you arrive, or have you arrived? How is the process? I don't think I arrived at all. No, but it still definitely has a distinct style. So
right. Well, for one, when I was doing film and I was doing production design, so that involved creating sets very often. It involved creating furniture because it just wasn't available of the kind that you looking for. So you ended up creating furniture for that. And I was drawn extremely strongly to mid-century, just because of its form. It was just absolutely glorious. It was pornography for me. And I think that stuck with me. And what also, my own philosophy of what I followed in terms of, say, making furniture, seemed to marry that. I don't know in depth necessarily the philosophy of the whole mid-century movement. I mean, I know the sort of
Broad premise.
the broad premise, and what's on the outside and all of that. I know all of that. But as I discovered my own reasons for doing what I'm doing, I seem to be able to, in reverse, correlate to mid-century. So it arrived at that beautifully as well. So it wasn't just form, it was function, it was form, it was philosophy, and they all seem to marry very well. Then, like I was saying earlier, the ease of making something, because at the end of the day, you want to make it at a price that's affordable. So we have to make the process simpler. So that again leads to a kind of a form, right? I think that became a part of the reason why it developed into what it developed. I was also influenced heavily by, necessity at times as well. Like, for example, Bombay has extremely high moisture content. And by the time, if something's made in the monsoon, and we can't shut shop during the monsoon, of course. So whatever's made in the monsoon, by the time winter comes, I'd say 2 out of 10 pieces develop a crack. Because the amount of moisture that the wood suddenly absorbs, and by the time winter comes, it contracts. So it develops a crack. Now, what I could use as a technique anywhere else in the world, I can't use in Bombay. Because it just tends to crack. So I've had to allow for a lot more expansion and contraction of wood, which is I study a lot of Japanese techniques of furniture making, and I mean there's always YouTube for that. It's great. So that allows you, because it's just wood and wood, and there's no screw, there's no nails, there's nothing else, right? So it just allows the wood to breathe, and that again dictates your form, and that dictates what you're going to end up, what it's going to end up looking like. So I think these considerations, along with a certain aesthetic, allow something to develop which you may not have necessarily visualized before, but it arrives at it. So you are an observer along the process as well. And I think that is what leads to form. It's not, I can't, I used to paint as well. I don't paint as often as I used to. But half my paintings I couldn't see. And when I finished them, I was like, oh wow, this looks nice, So it's and I like that process, because then I'm not arriving at a given point from where I've begun, and let it meander, let it flow, and it'll arrive somewhere, and you have inputs from everyone else around you as well, and your karigars, your other team, and people. So it's a work in progress, and I don't think what I've done earlier is necessarily the same as what I'm doing, say, even 3 or 5 years later. And it's a journey that will continue to grow, and I'm the kind of person who will like to constantly reinvent myself. So whether I don't think I'll ever arrive, and I don't necessarily know if I want to.
Yeah, that's very clear. So it's great.
Yeah.
All right, I think this is a good note to end this. Obviously, there's a lot more to talk and a lot to discuss about Baro or furniture making in general. But yeah, just given the time. So thank you, Siddharth. Just on the concluding note, if people have to follow Baro, it's on Instagram.
It's on Instagram.
Yeah,
yes.
it's Baro
Facebook.
India.
Baro.India, I think.
Baro.India.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not really into social media.
Yeah, I'll tag it.
Right, yeah.
And so I would tell the listeners to go and visit. There's a nice showroom in Sunmill compound.
That is right.
Anywhere, any place else?
No, we right now just here. We have a presence in Bangalore at Purple Turtle. We have a presence in Goa in a shop called Rangila. So we keep our furniture there. Also, Baro is more than just furniture. Baro, we try and include as much as possible of, we're promoting a lot of folk art. What it's not accessible really, and we try and get all the master craftsmen, artists to come and so ranging from Potachitras to Pitchwise to Gond artists to, all the traditional Indian folk art we're trying to promote. So a lot of it is there. We have a lot of carpets, we have a lot of lights, we have a lot of... So it's a home store. We have a lot of fabric, and the underlying principle behind all of this is that they're all driven by a certain amount of passion behind the traditional. In techniques, in terms of form, in terms of the philosophy, old school. Yeah, and very contemporary at the end of it.
Correct.
Yeah, the end result is extremely contemporary. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed one important question. What does Baro mean?
Oh, well, Baro actually means several things. But originally the reason why we chose Baro is that the address of our shop is 12 Sunmill Compound. And Baro in Bengali means 12.
Oh.
And my partner, Srila, she's Bengali, and she's like, it's great, let's just call it Baro. And it's an intriguing sounding word. It's a beautiful looking word, because the typology of those 4 letters looks very nice as well. So I was drawn strongly to that.
Phonetically also sounds...
Phonetically it sounds really nice. And it has a lot of intrigue. So that's why, people ask as to why Baro and what does it mean. And it's hard to pinpoint as to what it is. And as we later went around discovering what Baro means in other languages, it means a lot in a lot of other languages. Like in Kannada, I believe it means come.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it has a meaning in a language from Mali. So it has different, even I think in Rajasthan, someone said to me that Baro means something else. So it has different meanings in different languages, and we just leave it to anyone's imagination.
Superb. All right. Thank you, Siddharth, for giving your time, and it was really wonderful talking to you. I hope to have you again on AudioGyan sometime.
Well, thank you, Kedar. It was a pleasure.
Okay.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Saavn, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.